Welcome to Odyssey Supervision Training 101. Today we will learn the basics of Odyssey Supervision Module. We will start with how to initiate a new case. We will then discuss all of the different tabs within Odyssey Supervision Module and when they should be utilized. If you would like to start from the beginning and get some basics on Odyssey Navigator, please refer to JID University for additional training videos. To start, we're going to initiate a case. This would occur when the judge orders a defendant to pretrial supervision. There are a couple different ways to start. If you have your favorites set up, you can click directly from your favorites at Add Case Pretrial Supervision from Clerk's Case. If you do not have this option on your favorites, you can search by going to the menu and Add Case. From here, you can locate the Add Case Pretrial Supervision. If you'd like to add this to your favorites, you could click on the star to add this extension to your favorites list. From here, you will have to select the court node where you initiate cases. You can discuss this with your supervisor or program manager to determine where you initiate cases for your jurisdiction. Majority of jurisdictions initiate cases at the district court level. This brings you to a search menu. There are several options to search for a defendant. You can search by name and date of birth. You can use the advanced search to search by social security number. At this point, you likely have an order setting conditions of release that would have a case number. You can enter that case number to search for your specific case that you would like to initiate. At this point, you want to confirm that this is the correct defendant that you have searched for. The next step is you will mark all. This will put a check mark at all of the charges for this case. This will also then allow you to create a case. You could click on that to start the process. So here there are a few initial items that need to be completed in order to proceed in initiating a case. If you know the current supervision level, you could enter it at this time. So this would be from the conditions of release if the judge ordered a specific PML level, or from the public safety assessment if the judge did not order a specific level. There's only one category available to you, which is standard pretrial supervision. And here you could enter the officer's name that the case will be assigned to. You will also want to ensure that all of the dates are accurate. So if this order setting conditions of release was received on March the 2nd, 2023, we would want to change that date. There are also some areas that default. For example, the case status will default to open, which is what we want. Again, the date, we want to make sure that this is accurate to when the order setting conditions of release was ordered by the judge. Once you confirm all this information, you can save. And that will now validate your case and bring it into Odyssey Supervision Module. So now there's some information here that you want to verify before you move forward and edit this case. Ensure that the case number is correct and that the information for your defendant is correct as well. Once that's verified, you can edit this case. You are now in the Odyssey Supervision Module for this defendant. To start, we want to enter the conditions of release that were ordered for this defendant. We will click on the Conditions tab In any of the tabs, in order to enter new data or new information, you will see plus signs. If you click on the plus sign, this will allow you to enter any data that you are looking to enter. At this point, we want to add all conditions of release that the judge ordered. We will start by clicking Add. All of the conditions of release listed in this list will mirror those from the Supreme Court approved conditions of release form. One recommendation I have is that you change the sort from description to code. This will closely mirror the order in which these conditions of release are on the form. From here, you want to ensure that each condition of release that was ordered is checked off. As an example, we will select several conditions of release. By clicking Next, it takes you to the next set of conditions of release that are available to check. Once all conditions are checked, you can click on Continue. Here you can see that it brought in all the conditions of release that you checked off. You can add comments at this point if you would like. Once you click Save, you will see the conditions of release as they were ordered by the judge. If you are unable to see conditions of release after you follow these steps, ensure that you have this Show Text Only Conditions box checked off. Following the addition of conditions of release, you want to move on to the Events tab. There are some events that are required as part of case initiation. The first is every single case should have a order setting conditions of release event. Again, by clicking the plus sign, this will bring a list of events that are available for you to check off. The type, we are going to look for order setting conditions of release. Again, dates are extremely important. We want to make sure that the date matches the actual order from the judge. We want to enter the judge's name who ordered these conditions of release. You can also enter a comment at this point. Most of the jurisdictions enter the basic conditions of release that were ordered for this individual. And for this event type, that is all that is required. You will now see that we have the order setting conditions of release event, and that this individual was ordered pretrial supervision on March the 3rd, 2023. We now want to move on to the required contacts. Again, here's our plus sign. The case type group, you only have one option for this, and that is felony misdemeanor. The type of contact that we want to utilize at this point is a case initiation. This will help us identify cases that were initiated, the date that they were initiated, and there's also some required narrative information that each jurisdiction will require. When I click on this type, case initiation, some of these fields default to the current date and time, and also the current officer that is entering this contact note. We will get into more specifics in all of these tabs later in this training. For now, we want to enter a narrative. I recommend that you enter all of the information related to this case initiation, to include the date that pretrial was ordered, the judicial officer that ordered pretrial supervision, any special information related to the conditions of release, anything that you feel would be important for your fellow staff or your supervisor to be aware of. One common theme that you will hear throughout this training is that if you don't document, then it didn't happen. Please make sure that your documentation is thorough, concise, and complete. I also recommend that you add your initials to the end of all of your contacts so that it could be easily identified later as to who entered that contact. This is a short example. Your case initiation contact should include a lot more information. Once you click Save, you will be able to see this contact and you can pull it up later to read the narrative. At this point, you may also want to set future contacts, such as a future intake appointment, so that you will be notified if this defendant fails to report within the scheduled timelines. Again, we will discuss this more later in the training. The next piece as part of case initiation is the Statistics tab. The Statistics tab is related to an individual. What is the client's status at this time? Everything else that we've completed to this point is related to the case, but this will help us identify where the client is at this time. Again, we will click the plus. This will again default to the current date and time. The type that we want to select is client status. And we have several responses that are available. So we want to identify at this point, where is the defendant? Let's assume in this situation that the defendant was in custody at the time of their initial appearance. We are going to enter in custody and save. We want to continue to update this client status as the defendant's situation changes. For example, if the defendant is in custody on March 3rd and then released the following day, we want to modify that client status. So if he was released but has yet to report to pretrial supervision as ordered, the client status would become out of custody. This keeps a running log of where that individual is at any given time. So as another example, if this defendant were to report on March 5th for their initial intake, we would once again be required to update the client status. At this point, we identify if the defendant is reporting, if the defendant was ordered to a PML 1, and for your jurisdiction, if PML 1s do not report on a regular frequency, you would utilize this client status. This defendant has been ordered to PML 3. They reported for their initial intake, so their client status becomes reporting. And you could see that we will continue to have a running log of client statuses. Now that we have initiated a case in Odyssey Supervision, let's get into more detail about supervision. First, let's start with our workspace. Again, if you have your workspace, also known as widgets, on your favorites, you can click it directly. Otherwise, you can go to the menu and search for workspace and open it from here. I have not configured my workspace. There are several options. You could change the layout to have 4 or 6 frames. For this example, we'll use 4. Each jurisdiction may have a preference for how your widgets are configured. Please refer to your program manager or supervisor. There are several options for your widget to include your current caseload, providing contact information, so for future contacts, for example, hearings that are scheduled to occur in the future. You can also add a space for URL bookmarks, so you could easily get to some of your websites. For this first one, I'm going to configure it as caseload. If you have any cases assigned to you in Odyssey Supervision, they will appear here in your active caseload. This is also an easy way to click and get to your cases immediately. For this second one, you can enter contacts. There are several options for contacts. The way that it's currently configured, you could see that I completed a contact with this defendant earlier on this date. By clicking on the funnel here, you can change several options. You can look at contacts that have occurred in the past 20 days. You can also look for scheduled contacts in the future. So anything that you have scheduled as far as 20 days in advance. You could change that if you only wanted to see what is scheduled within the next 5 days. Again, please refer to your local jurisdiction to determine what the preference is on your widgets. So let's get back into the case that we initiated earlier. We're going to discuss each of these tabs in more detail. Beginning with the Summary tab. Summary tab is exactly that. We don't have to enter any information in here. It just gives you basic information for the case. It gives you the level and category that this individual is currently reporting on, the charges for the case, any recent activity. This will bring in any events, any contacts, any court hearings. It will also provide any flags that this individual may have. If they were currently in warrant status, for example, there would be an in warrant flag for this defendant. The Details tab. Again, it provides information related to the case type. It provides additional information to the charges for this defendant, the current case assignment, and the current status. This case status allows you the option to enter dates, open and close cases. I recommend you do not open or close cases in the Details tab, as the majority of these case statuses are driven by events. You can also add case flags if this is something that is utilized in your jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions use a hold flag to identify individuals that require extra attention and may need to see an officer. These other flags are driven by events as well, and you do not have to manually check these off. The Parties tab can get you to the global party record for this defendant. If you were to click on this defendant's name, and again, you can modify party information for this defendant. Each jurisdiction has specific policies and rules regarding what they can and can't change for a defendant. So please refer to your local SOPs. Here you could modify information such as current phone numbers, addresses, and additional information. The Level Assess tab. This is where you can identify what level the defendant is currently reporting at and who the assigned officer is. In this tab, you could also reassign a case to a different officer, or you could reassign the PML level if that changes. By clicking on this box, you can modify and make changes. Mr. Roybal is currently the assigned officer to this case. If you were to click plus, you can change that assignment to another officer. As you could see, there's an error because the date assigned must be on or before the current date. There are other areas within Odyssey Supervision that will provide an error code if you are entering data incorrectly. Everything within Odyssey is saved. You will see that this will show you the history of assigned officers. You could also assign an administrative officer level. Several of our program managers throughout the state assign themselves as the administrative officer. This allows them access to view caseloads and to view future hearings for their officers. This is not required. This may be more specific to your local jurisdiction. We do not use the Financials tab within Odyssey Supervision. The next tab would be the Contacts tab. So Contacts is where we document anything and everything that has occurred in your case. Any contacts that you make with your defendant, any court hearings that you appear for or receive information, any contacts that you have with any parties in the case. All of those items would be documented here in the Contacts tab. Again, you hit the plus sign and this will bring you to add a contact. The case type is felony misdemeanor, and there are several different types of contacts that you could enter. Everything from your office visit and remote scheduled visits to your violation information. Please refer to your standard operating procedure for OSM to get additional information on each and every one of these contact types. For purposes of today's training, we are only going to discuss the violation information contact type. This is where our violation information forms are created if a defendant has a violation while under supervision. This is where we enter our information, which then populates information into a form that gets submitted to the court, notifying them of potential conditions of release violations. By clicking violation information type, the contact narrative creates 4 narrative boxes. All 4 of these should be completed by the officer. The first is violation details. What is the specific violation? What occurred during this incident? And what information is pertinent and important for the judge to make a decision on potentially modifying conditions of release? Violation details should include dates, times, again, the specific violation details. Performance on supervision. This should include any mitigating factors, any information related to how the defendant has been performing on supervision up to this point. Previous violations or results. You should include any violation history that this defendant has had while under pretrial supervision for any case, not just this case. And your contact narrative should always include a recommendation. You want to refer to your local pretrial services guidelines to determine what the appropriate recommendation for this violation should be. Once all this information is completed, you will click on Save and Print. This will then allow you to select one of several violation reports. Again, referring to your local guidelines, you will determine what violation report is appropriate to submit to the court. Once you identify the report, you click on it, and the information that you just entered will merge into this form and be available to submit to the court. The Conditions tab. We discussed this during case initiation. It is important to ensure that conditions of release are entered accurately and reflect the conditions of release ordered by the court. The Orders tab is not currently used in Odyssey Supervision. The next tab will be the Events tab. And the Events tab identifies any specific events that occur within a case. Again, we will not cover all of these event types. Please refer to the SOP for additional information. The most important events that need to be docketed in Odyssey Supervision are related to failure to appear bench warrants and new charge incidents. These refer to a defendant who has picked up a new charge while under supervision. Events is where you will also document any violations that an individual has while under supervision. You will close cases using events. There are other events such as intakes, when a defendant reports for their initial intake. If a defendant is ordered to GPS, you will also event that information. Each of your pretrial services guidelines also include a step-down eligibility. If a defendant is eligible and stepped down, you would event that here as well. A lot of the data and information that we provide to your court, your stakeholders, the legislature, and management come from events that you enter. All events that occur in a case should be documented in order to give yourselves credit for the work that you are doing with your defendants. The next tab is the Hearings tab. There is nothing to enter in the Hearings tab. This pulls over future hearings from the case manager side of Odyssey. This is a quick way to identify if this individual that you are working with has any future hearings scheduled. The Victims tab is not currently used in the Odyssey Supervision Module. Next is the Drug Testing tab. Some of our local jurisdictions currently use the Drug Testing tab. Others use third-party software programs in order to manage their drug testing. Please refer to your program manager or supervisor to determine if your jurisdiction is using the Drug Testing tab. The Interventions tab is not used in Odyssey Supervision Module. And the final tab to cover is the Statistics tab. Again, we briefly discussed this during our case initiation portion of this training. Odyssey Supervision Module is a case-based system. Therefore, areas like events must be entered in all pending supervision cases. If you have a defendant with multiple cases and they have a violation of conditions of release, for example, you may have to enter that violation each and every case that is currently pending. It's important for us to not only be able to provide information related to a case, but information related to an individual. And that is why we utilize the Statistics tab. This tab transfers across the person regardless of how many cases they currently have. So if you enter a client status on one case, it will transfer across all pending cases for this individual. So you only have to enter the client status once for a defendant who has multiple pending cases. This will also continue to track a client status for defendants who may have open and closed supervision type of cases. So it will keep a history of that individual's client status. Again, very important to note that the Statistics tab documents the individual and what their status is at any given time. Using this example again, we can see that on March 3rd, this defendant was in custody. They were released from custody on March 4th, and they reported for their initial intake with pretrial supervision on March 5th. A client's status could change several times through the course of their supervision. As another example, let's say this defendant had a new bench warrant issued for their arrest on March the 7th. That would change this client's status from reporting to in warrant. And again, we will continue to see the history for this individual. This training will be accompanied by an OSM standard operating procedure that will provide much more detail as to each and every code and the importance of each code in Odyssey Supervision Module. Please refer to that SOP for additional information. You may also reach out to the Administrative Office of the Courts for additional in-depth training on OSM, or your program manager or supervisor for additional guidance and support in the Odyssey Supervision Module. Again, the most important piece is that if something is not documented in OSM, it didn't occur. Please give yourselves credit for the supervision that you are providing for these defendants.